Okay, we got to magic numbers. Let's go straight to Visual Studio and see what is a magic number and how we can get rid of it. You can find this example in Solution Explorer under Magic Numbers folder. Let's see what's happening here. So we've got this class here with a couple of methods, approve document and reject document. Let's start with the first one. So approve document gets an integer, which is the status. And here we have a couple of conditionals to compare that status against 1 and 2. And this is what we call a magic number. Why is it a magic number? Because I, as a reader of this code, have no idea what 1 represents. What is 1? What is 2? How are they different? This kind of magic numbers make code hard to read, hard to understand, and hard to change. And this is something that we should avoid at all times. Sometimes I have seen some people add a bit of comment next to this comparison, like 1 is draft or 2 is lodged. But this is not really a good way. There is a better way. So let's get rid of these comments. Whenever you see a magic number in your code, what you need to do is to select it, Ctrl+Shift+R. Now you have a few options here. You can extract a method from that. You can introduce a field or a parameter or a variable. Out of these 4 options, I do not recommend extracting a method or a parameter because that makes your code even more ugly. So let's see what's the difference between a variable or a field. So with variable, we can extract either a variable or a constant here. I would go for constant integer and give it a proper, meaningful name. So draft is a good example. This way, we don't need that additional comment here. So we replace a comment with a properly named constant. We can do the same thing with 2 here. So introduce variable, we select constant integer, and this one should be called lodged. Now this approach is okay if you have only one method in your application where these numbers have meanings. If we are going to reuse these numbers somewhere else, it doesn't make sense to have constant integers repeated in different parts of your code. So a better approach to solve this problem is to use an enumeration. So let's revert what we have done so far. Okay, this time instead of introducing a variable, I would like to introduce a field. Okay, here we need to give it a proper name, so draft in this case. And I would like to select introduce constant. Let's see what happens. So we got a private constant integer called draft that is defined at the class level. Now we repeat the same step with this magic number here. So introduce field, give it a name, and select introduce constant. Now with this approach, we got all our constant declarations in one place. But we are not done yet. Eventually, we want to convert that to an enumeration so that we can reuse it in different places. Unfortunately, at the time of me recording this, ReSharper, based on my knowledge, is not able to extract that into an enum. So we need to do it manually. The first step we need to do is to extract a separate class from this. So we select all our constant declarations, then Ctrl+Shift+R, extract class. Now here we type in the name of the new class. I'm going to call it document status. Remember, for naming enumerations in .NET, we use singular form. So we're going to call it document status, not document statuses. Now you see 2 problems in this dialog box that are indicated by this red icon here. And the tooltip says this member is unavailable somewhere because of accessibility issue. And the reason is because we declared these constants as private. If we extract them into a separate class, they're not going to be accessible. So let's click this icon here. And we can select make public. Now let's go ahead. Okay, so ReSharper put that in a separate file. But you see we have a reference to that document status class. Let's go there with Ctrl+B. So we are one step closer to an enumeration. And this is the part that ReSharper cannot help, and we need to manually do it ourselves. So first we need to change class to enum. And then we need to get rid of public constant integer. And no semicolon, just a comma. Same here. Now we have a proper enumeration that we can reference in multiple places in our code. No more magic numbers. Now we're going to have a breaking change, but that's pretty easy to fix. So let's get back to our magic numbers class. The reason we get this error here is because we send an integer like status, but we're comparing that against an enumeration. There are two ways to fix this problem. One is to cast that enumeration to an integer, something like this. But what I don't like about this approach is you have to repeat this in multiple places. To me, this is like treating the symptoms, not the actual problem. So what is the actual problem? The actual problem is the wrong data type for the argument of this method. So let's revert this. When we have a proper type like an enumeration that represents the status of a document in our system, why are we passing integers around? So we need to reuse that enumeration. Now what we're going to do is we need to change the signature of this method. Now at this point, do not go and change this integer to document status. Yeah, that solves this problem, but that's going to break the client of this method. So a safer way is to use change signature refactoring. So we put the cursor on the method name, either Control F6 or Control Shift R, and then select change signature. So we want the parameter of this method to be of type document status, and we keep the name as is. And here is the preview of our method afterward. There you go. Now ReSharper tries to modify all references to this method in a safe way. Again, it's not always successful, but it does a pretty good job and saves you a lot of time and headache. Okay, now let's take a look at another example. In the reject document method, actually there is a misspelling here. That's document, should be document. So here, instead of sending a number, we send a string. So we have a magic string. Again, when I see that code, I have no idea what is 1, what is 2. So how can we resolve this problem? Again, now that we have a proper enumeration, we go to our method, change its signature in a safe way. So instead of sending a string, we send document status enumeration. And of course, we have breaking changes because now that enumeration cannot be translated to this magic string. So we need to manually fix that. And 1 is actually draft. And 2 is lodged. Oops. There you go. So what I want you to take away from this lecture is to avoid magic numbers at all times. Either extract them into a constant or use an enumeration if you're going to use them in multiple places.